She blocked me on everything, then posted a healing in Bali reel with Miller the next morning. That's when I knew Dina hadn't disappeared, she had replaced me. The night before, we had dinner at her apartment. She wore my hoodie, kissed me like we had forever, and promised we'd fly out for her birthday together. I left her doorstep at 11:02 p.m. with a smile. By 7:00 a.m., I was blocked. Not muted, blocked. From every app, every number, every way. I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe she got hacked, but by noon, she'd posted a story of her clinking wine glasses with Miller, hashtagging it, #soft life, #resetting energy. For a moment, I felt like a ghost, like the last year of my life had only happened to me. I didn't text Carol, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just went quiet. 3 days later, I signed a catering contract for someone else's wedding and realized I didn't need closure. I needed a plan. I changed my number, left our old apartment, and started rebuilding the business she told me was too outdated to survive Gen Z. The first payment I received under my new brand, Ross Company, was from a client who wanted a minimalist rooftop wedding. The second was from a floral designer who said, "I used to follow your ex Dina until she got weirdly fake." The third was from Carol. She didn't say anything, she just sent a date, a venue, and a name. Ross. I texted her, "Whose wedding?" She replied, "Ours if you're ready." That's when I ordered Dina a cream envelope with gold trim and sent it to the exact address she blocked me from. No return address, just one line inside, "You're invited." The envelope must have landed by morning, because by 10:37 a.m., Dina unblocked me. No hi, no explanation, just a DM that read, "Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't reply. She sent a second message, this time in all caps, "Ross, tell me this is a joke." Still nothing. She tried call. I let it ring. She tried texting, blocked again. It was my turn to vanish. That night, Carol and I finalized the table layout. She asked, "You sure you want her name on that list?" I looked at it, "Ms. Dina Ray, seat 12B. I want her to see everything," I said. "I want her to realize I never needed to scream. Silence did the job." Carol didn't smile, she just nodded, like someone who'd seen me fall apart and watched me stitch it back together with steady hands. 3 days before the wedding, Dina emailed my business account, probably the only contact left she hadn't been blocked on. "I need to talk, just 5 minutes, please." She was smart this time, she came in person. She waited outside Ross Company headquarters in a beige coat, oversized sunglasses hiding her face, her confidence, the curated energy she used to wear like perfume, it was gone. "Ross," she called out as I approached the front steps. "Dina?" She removed the glasses, her eyes were swollen, makeup barely clinging to the edges. "I know I messed up," she said quickly. "I panicked. Things with Miller weren't what they seemed." "You blocked me the night we planned our future," I said coldly. "You ghosted me. And now you want forgiveness because the silence didn't echo the way you expected?" She flinched. "It wasn't about him. I didn't know how to tell you I felt trapped. That everything was moving too fast." "Then you should have spoken," I said, "not vanished like a coward." "I didn't come to fight," she whispered. "I came to say, don't do this. Don't marry Carol. It's too fast. It's not real." I let the silence breathe. Then, "You told me I was too soft, too emotional for business, too slow for success." Her lip trembled. "Well, I got harder," I said. "Fast enough to leave you behind, and focused enough to know Carol stood beside me when you were already on a plane." "Do you love her?" she asked, voice cracking. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because the next day, Carol handed me the rings. Simple. No diamonds. Just 2 brushed bands engraved with, "We begin again." Ross never believed in perfect beginnings. His first memory of Dina wasn't cinematic, it wasn't love at first sight or some electrifying glance across a crowded cafe, it was awkward. She spilled an iced coffee on his proposal notes in a co-working lounge in downtown LA. She didn't even apologize immediately, instead, she grinned, tapped his ink-smudged paper with a polished nail, and said, "Guess that's your sign to start over." Most people would have been annoyed. Ross wasn't most people. He looked at the mess, handed her a napkin, and calmly replied, "You missed a spot." That was Dina, bold, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. Ross had just started the rebranding phase of his small but promising catering startup, working solo after splitting from his first business partner. He was tired, hungry, focused. Dina, on the other hand, was freshly dumped, recently viral for a skincare rant, and looking for something, anything, to reframe her public image. She called it her Phoenix year. Somehow, they clicked. She helped polish his online aesthetic, he helped her heal quietly. Their personalities were opposite currents, but they merged, faster than either expected. Their first official date wasn't dinner, it was him making finger foods for her friend's birthday party when the caterer bailed last minute. She posted about it, tagged him, called him the most emotionally intelligent man I've ever met. Ross smiled when he saw the post. He thought visibility meant progress. That was his first mistake. Because for Dina, visibility wasn't proof of love, it was leverage. She curated their relationship like a brand launch. Their weekend trips turned into couples content. Their dog, Beanie, had an Instagram before Ross even had one. She took pictures before she kissed. Her camera roll held more filtered affection than her heart did. Ross adapted. He wasn't against sharing. He didn't mind being seen, but he didn't expect to be performed. And slowly, his real moments were replaced by good lighting and sponsored captions. Still, he stayed. He loved her. Or maybe he loved the idea of who she might become once the world stopped watching. Carol knew the difference. She had entered the picture years before, long before Dina, long before any filtered love. She and Ross co-founded Ross Company before it was even called that. Back then, it was just a vague idea, two overworked creatives with a beat-up food truck and a shared dream. Carol sketched logos on napkins and hand-wrote menus when printers jammed. She wasn't flashy, but she was reliable, and that, to Ross, mattered more than beauty. They had chemistry, but not timing. When Carol got accepted into a design fellowship in Paris, Ross encouraged her to go. They never dated, but their goodbye hug lingered, and sometimes when he was too tired to think, Ross would wonder what would have happened if she had stayed. She didn't stay, she left. And so did that version of his life. In her absence, Dina filled the space, with charisma, sparkle, and movement. Always movement. Their first 6 months were dizzying. Collaborations, campaigns, and photo shoots. She was building a platform, she said. Ross was part of it. Not the main feature, more like the emotionally grounded supporting character in her brand. But when Dina laughed, it sounded like everything was okay. When she fell asleep on his chest, Ross believed, however briefly, that it wasn't just optics. The tension came slowly. It wasn't explosive, it was cumulative. She began disappearing, not physically, but emotionally. He'd talk, she'd scroll, he'd cook, she'd pose with the plate, then order takeout. When he talked about scaling their business, she talked about moving to Miami for a collab house. Ross adjusted his dreams. He thought that was love. The name Miller popped up casually at first. A message preview she didn't hide. A story like a panel invitation from an old friend. Ross didn't ask questions. He wasn't the jealous type, but he noticed. Dina used to compare everyone to Ross. Now, she compared Ross to Miller. Miller had been her college boyfriend, a tech startup dreamer who crashed and burned his way into mid-tier relevance. He ran a boutique agency now, specializing in content alignment, whatever that meant. He wore velvet loafers with no socks and referred to himself in third person during interviews. Ross had only met him once, at a launch party. Miller shook his hand, called him the stable one, and winked. That was enough. Ross didn't lose Dina to heartbreak. He lost her to performance, to perception, to a version of herself that she believed the world wanted more than the quiet, gentle love she actually had. And Ross finally stopped chasing. When Dina ghosted him, it wasn't shocking, it was just the confirmation of 1,000 little silences that had built up across months, the absence of an I love you here, the skipped dinner there, the locked phone screen on her side of the bed. He waited 2 days. Then he texted Carol. Not with desperation, but with clarity. She responded in under a minute. They met for coffee, no filters, no drama, just a real cup, real table, real silence that felt safe. Carol never asked what happened with Dina, she just said, "Welcome back." And Ross knew then, it wasn't about going back, it was about restarting forward. Carol didn't fix him, he wasn't broken, she simply reminded him of a version of himself that existed before public approval ever mattered. Over the next 2 months, Ross slowly rebuilt his business. Carol helped rebrand it, clean slate, new colors, new tagline, events with intent, clients noticed, momentum returned. And then one day, she sent him a text. I have a date, a venue, and a name. It's yours, if you want it. He thought it was a project. He asked, whose wedding? She replied, ours, if you're ready. He didn't answer right away, but he didn't say no either. Instead, he went to his old apartment, emptied it of what little Dina had left behind, and drafted an invitation. A cream envelope, gold foil trim, no return address. Just her name, Miss Dina Ray, and inside, one line, you're invited. Not I miss you, not let's talk, not why did you leave. Just silence in a prettier font. Ross wasn't trying to provoke. He was simply matching her energy, with elegance. Because if Dina wanted closure, she had it. And if she didn't? Well, then, she'd do what she always did, scroll past it. Ross didn't expect a response. After all, ghosts don't answer the door, they linger, they drift, they haunt the quiet. But Dina did respond. Not through words, but through movement. 2 days after the invitation was delivered, a photographer tagged Ross in an Instagram story. The caption read, guess who's back in town? #power moves. The photo showed Dina in a maroon jumpsuit outside Ross Company's studio. Carol saw it before he did. She didn't flinch, but she definitely didn't smile. She's going to play it like she was the one left behind, Carol murmured. Ross stayed quiet. He wasn't surprised. Dina didn't handle silence well. She controlled the narrative or she unraveled. There was no middle ground. What he didn't expect, however, was the email. It came from Miller's agency, not Dina directly. It was a formal cease and desist. The claim? Ross was using private likeness and personal experiences for commercial spectacle. In short, they were accusing him of building clout off Dina's name and her relationship. Ross stared at the email for a long time, then he simply wrote one sentence in reply. Please list which trademarked part of being ghosted I violated. Carol laughed for the first time that day. They didn't respond after that. But Dina didn't back down either. She started dropping subtle jabs on her socials, no names, but the timing was surgical. First, a reel titled Healed People Don't Need Closure, Just Boundaries. Then a carousel of quotes, some men only respect you when you leave them. Then a caption. If they were really happy, they wouldn't still be watching. Ross wasn't watching. His team was, his clients were, his inbox was. Suddenly, old followers started trickling into his pages. New comments popped up. Wasn't this the guy Dina dated? Why's he copying her energy now? Carol advised him to stay quiet. But the media didn't. A mid-tier wedding blog picked up the story after piecing together timelines. From fiancé to feed war, #wedding revenge, went viral. Ross refused to read the article. But Dina did more than read it, she amplified it. She shared her story with a broken heart emoji and a single line. Wild, how some people never grow up. Ross didn't answer. But Carol did, and she did it the only way that mattered. She changed the RSVP name tag from Ms. Dina Ray to guest, emotional lesson number 37. Dina wasn't used to losing the spotlight, that made her dangerous. Ross knew it, Carol predicted it. So when Dina showed up in person the next week, uninvited, unscheduled, Ross had already installed a new front desk check-in system. She didn't make it past the lobby. Still, her presence stirred the office. A few newer interns whispered, one took a photo. Ross instructed them not to post it. Dina, meanwhile, uploaded a selfie from a cafe nearby with the caption, some wounds look like healed people. Miller reposted it with a fire emoji. That was his role now, Instagram hype man. A decade ago, Miller left Dina to find himself on a digital nomad tour. Now he had come back with a ring light and a podcast about emotional currency. Ross had never disliked him, he had just never trusted him. When he appeared in the background of Dina's unbothered vlog, pouring tea like he'd been there all along, Ross finally understood what this was. It wasn't a breakup. It was a narrative war, and Dina had started filming again. Carol called an emergency meeting the day the teaser dropped. In it, Dina walked along a Malibu cliffside with voiceover narration. When the people you love most use your past as their platform, you learn to take back the mic. Ross didn't speak, he just leaned forward and said, "What's the play?" Carol's eyes narrowed. "We don't defend, we create." That week, Ross Company launched a full rebrand campaign, not referencing Dina once. Instead, they spotlighted real couples. Honest stories. Clients who had survived hard things, cancer, long distance, immigration paperwork, miscarriage. Their weddings weren't photo perfect, but they were human. The campaign was called Rooted. Dina's team accused him of emotional pandering. Ross ignored them, but clients didn't. Bookings soared. Dina retaliated by leaking a series of clips, some taken from old vlogs, others clearly filmed without Ross's knowledge. In one, he looked tired after a 14-hour shift. In another, he rubbed his eyes and said, "I just wish she'd tell me what she really wants." She captioned them. "When he shows you his real self, believe it." People speculated. Podcasts picked it up. Twitter swarmed. But something strange happened. For every person who mocked Ross, 5 others defended him. Old clients spoke up. Staff members posted anonymously. Even Beanie's old dog sitter wrote a thread. They all said the same thing. Ross never filmed us, he listened. Dina tried to delete comments, then she tried to disable them. Then she posted a story at 2 a.m., crying in her car. Ross didn't repost it. He didn't even screenshot it. But Carol, watching from across the room, exhaled. She's unraveling. The next escalation came dressed in sequins. Dina announced a last-minute gala, celebrating digital self-love, sponsored by Miller's agency. All influencers are welcome. The poster had Dina in gold, arms wide, with the phrase, "Return, reclaim, rise." The event was scheduled for the same night as Ross and Carol's final wedding rehearsal. Coincidence? No one believed that. Ross didn't react, not publicly. But that night, he added one name to the guest list, under the section marked Media Access, Miller, +1. It was the first time he'd acknowledged them directly. Carol noticed. "Are you okay with that?" she asked. Ross looked at the list. "He's never seen me at peace, let him." The rehearsal went beautifully. Candles flickered. Beanie barked at the violinist. Carol tripped once on the aisle runner and cursed under her breath. They laughed. No posts, no press. Sending people who mattered. As guests began to leave, someone slipped Ross a phone. It showed a live stream, Dina, on stage, crying, mid-speech. "And maybe I did lose something real, but I won myself back." The audience clapped. Miller kissed her cheek. Ross watched for 5 seconds, then closed the screen. Carol sat beside him. "She's still hoping you'll react." "I already did," he said. She tilted her head. "When?" He looked at her. "When I stopped trying to prove I was enough." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Dina kept the live stream going for another 30 minutes. Ross didn't open it again. The morning after, Ross received a voice note. From Dina. He stared at it. Played it once. "I was selfish. I know. But you were too quiet, Ross. I needed someone loud." Pause. "I didn't think you'd walk away quietly. I thought you'd chase me." Another pause. "I guess I was wrong." He saved the file, then archived it, then stood up and picked up the wedding rings. That night, he would rehearse his vows, and he would mean every word. Ross had never been the kind of man who ran from discomfort, but he had never expected discomfort to take the shape of something he once called home. The days between the rehearsal and the wedding blurred like rain on a windshield. Every task completed felt like a delay to a storm he wasn't sure he was ready to name. He didn't regret proposing to Carol. He didn't regret rebuilding his business, silencing the noise, and walking away from someone who treated love like a filter. But he did regret believing for a second that closure was clean. Because it wasn't. Every quiet moment, Dina's voice threaded through the walls of his mind, not like a ghost, but like unfinished dialogue. "You should have fought for me. I needed someone loud. You didn't even try." It was ridiculous, She had blocked him, vanished, erased him from her story, and yet her final words stuck sharper than the betrayal itself. Carol noticed. She didn't pressure him, but she started leaving little things behind, post-it notes with calming quotes, herbal tea instead of coffee, Beanie's leash looped on the door so Ross wouldn't forget to take a walk. He appreciated it, but he also felt guilt that he was still carrying someone else's damage into something new. One morning, he found himself standing in front of the mirror, dressed in the suit he would wear at the wedding. He didn't recognize himself. Not because he looked wrong, but because he looked incomplete, not broken, not defeated, just unresolved. Carol knocked softly. "You okay?" He didn't lie. "No." She nodded once. "We don't have to do anything that doesn't feel right." He looked at her, fully. Not as a savior, not as a rebound, but as a woman who had always been there, even when she had every reason not to be. "I want to marry you," he said, voice steady. "But I also want to be sure I'm whole when I do." Carol didn't ask what that meant. She just handed him a key. "One day off, no questions. Come back when you're ready." Ross left that night. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He drove to the coast, booked a cheap cabin, and turned off his phone. There, he wrote letters he didn't plan to send. One to Dina, one to himself. One to the version of him that stayed silent because he thought love was endurance. He cried, not dramatically, not for hours, but in one hard, sharp wave that hit between the second and third letter. He realized he never stopped loving Dina. He had just stopped needing her, and that was grief in its purest form. In the morning, he didn't feel new, but he did feel lighter. He cooked eggs in silence. I walked barefoot in the sand, watched birds compete for breadcrumbs outside a half-closed diner. The world kept moving, and for the first time in months, Ross didn't feel like he was running behind it. Back in the cabin, he stared at the note he'd written to himself. It said, "You loved her, you outgrew her. That's not betrayal, that's growth." By the time he returned to the city, the wedding was 2 days away. Carol opened the door before he knocked. "You look rested," she said. "I'm not," he admitted, "but I am ready." She smiled, not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. They didn't talk about Dina, they didn't have to, but the silence wasn't the kind that suffocated anymore. It was the kind that gave space for breath. That night, Ross received a voice memo. It wasn't from Dina, it was from Miller. The voice was casual, but the message wasn't. "You know, man, you've made her look like a fool. She's spiraling. The brand's taking a hit. She'll never admit it, but she's hurting. Maybe call her, be human." Ross stared at the screen. It was strange, hearing guilt come from a man who once compared him to a lamp, safe, but dull. He didn't reply. Instead, he opened his camera, pointed it toward the night sky, and sent a voice note back. "I was human. That's why she left." He blocked Miller immediately after. The next day, the venue team asked if Ross wanted to adjust the seating chart. One name remained unanswered, Ms. Dina Ray. Ross kept it. Not to provoke, but because erasing someone isn't the same as healing from them. He placed her card at the far side, near the exit, by the floral wall where no camera angles would catch her. If she came, she would see it all. But she wouldn't be part of it. That night, Carol found him in the kitchen, holding the wedding rings again. He hadn't cried. But his grip was tight. She walked over and said softly, "Tell me what's still hurting." He didn't say Dina's name. He didn't have to. He just said, "It's the idea that I wasn't worth staying for." Carol placed her hand on top of his. "You weren't too small, she was too temporary." That broke something in him, and built something new at the same time. He leaned his head against her shoulder and let himself be held. Not because he needed fixing, but because he finally allowed himself to be known. On the morning of the wedding, Ross woke up before dawn, not in panic, not in regret, but in peace. He brewed coffee, fed Beanie, and sat by the window. The city still slept. His vows were already written, but he read them again. They weren't poetic. They were real. They said, "Thank you for showing me that love doesn't have to be loud to be strong, that peace is not the absence of history, it's the decision to stop bleeding from it." That was enough. That was everything. He folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket, and got ready to marry the person who stood with him, not above, not behind, but beside. The wedding was set to begin in less than 3 hours when Carol's phone buzzed, not a text, not a notification, a call from a private number. She answered without thinking, assuming it was the florist or venue manager. But the voice on the other end wasn't familiar, and the message was sharp. You should know what's about to hit the internet before your guests do. Click. No name, no explanation, just dread. Carol didn't tell Ross immediately. She slipped into the bridal suite, locked the door, and opened Instagram. And there it was. A video, posted just minutes ago to Dina's private story, already screen recorded, mirrored, and shared across accounts. The caption, "My truth before his vows." The thumbnail was familiar. Dina seated at the edge of a hotel bed, dressed in soft beige, hair loose, face bare except for glistening tears held at the rim of her lashes. The video began with silence, then a soft inhale. "I never wanted to hurt Ross," she began, voice quiet, shaking slightly. "I didn't know how to leave, so I ghosted. That's my shame, but what people don't know is, we were never really over. Not fully." Carol froze. The video continued. "We were still talking, still seeing each other, even after he started getting close to Carol. The timeline isn't what you think, I was still in his life." She looked down, wiping a tear that hadn't quite fallen. "I'm not trying to ruin anything, I just want the truth to live somewhere, before it's too late." No names were tagged, no proof was offered. But the video had already begun to spread. "My truth, #Ross exposed, #justice. For Dina." Within 30 minutes, wedding guests were whispering. 2 groomsmen checked Twitter. A cousin asked for the Wi-Fi password, just to confirm something. When Carol walked into the preparation room, Ross was fixing his cufflinks. He looked up the second she entered, reading her face with precision. "What happened?" She didn't speak, just held up the phone. He watched the video once, didn't flinch, didn't ask for a replay. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. "She recorded that weeks ago." Carol looked surprised. "I remember that sweater, she wore it the day she tried to get into the office, same room, same lighting, same manipulation." "So it's staged," Carol said. Ross nodded. "Planted, timed, strategic. And people are believing it. They believed her when she ghosted me. I survived that." Carol hesitated. "Does it matter if it's not true? Perception still impacts, Ross." "I know." She looked at him, her eyes not angry, just tired. "Will it affect us?" Ross didn't answer immediately. He sat down on the edge of the bench, staring at the floor like it held the last piece of a puzzle. "I thought I'd dealt with her, I thought silence was stronger than rebuttal, but she's not trying to win me back anymore, she just doesn't want to watch me move on." Carol knelt down in front of him, took his hands. "You don't owe me perfection, but if there's truth I don't know yet, I'd rather hear it now." Ross met her gaze. "There was a week," he admitted, "after Dina ghosted me and before we officially launched the business again. She called from a burner number, said she missed me, asked if I wanted to meet." Carol said nothing. "I almost went. I even stood outside the cafe for 5 minutes, but I never went inside. I turned around, I went home, and deleted her number." Carol squeezed his hands gently. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because I was ashamed I even considered it." She didn't let go, she just nodded. "That's all I needed to know." Outside, things escalated. The video had reached influencer gossip accounts. A few former mutuals had reposted it. No one claimed to believe it, but the comments spiraled. "She always said he was too passive. Why do men wait until a woman snaps to become decent? Carol deserves better." Ross didn't respond online, he didn't log in. But silence wasn't armor anymore. People began speculating if the wedding would even happen. Reporters showed up outside the venue gates. One even pretended to be a guest just to get photos of Carol. The officiant called to ask if everything was still proceeding. Ross gave a firm yes. But inside, he was unraveling. Not from guilt, but from exhaustion. He had thought the final chapter was already written. He had thought peace was permanent. Now it felt like his future was being decided by an ex who couldn't stand to see him let go. An hour before the ceremony, Miller called. Ross didn't pick up. He texted instead, "I hope this is your final favor to her, because it ends here." Miller replied with a thumbs up. Carol's dress had been pressed, her makeup was done, her vows were printed on handmade paper. And yet, something had changed. Her smile was still present, but her posture was guarded, not toward Ross, but toward the world. He noticed. "I can still pull the plug," he whispered as they stood behind the closed door of the ceremony aisle. "You don't have to protect me from my own past." Carol looked up at him. "I'm not afraid of your past, Ross. I'm afraid of you carrying it like a ghost in our house." He nodded slowly. "Then today, I leave it at the door." She softened. "Promise?" "Promise." The ceremony began 15 minutes later than scheduled. People were seated, phones silenced, cameras lowered. But tension buzzed under the surface. Ross stood waiting as Carol walked down the aisle, not like a fragile bride, but like a woman choosing her path with full clarity. Her hand slid into his like it belonged there all along. The officiant spoke. They exchanged vows. There was no mention of exes, no apologies, no borrowed sorrow. Only the truth, only today. When they kissed, the room erupted, the noise was real, not rehearsed. And in the back row, an empty chair bore a T. Name card, Ms. Dina Ray. No one sat there, no one dared. At the reception, Ross stepped away for a moment. He walked to the back of the venue, where a breeze caught the edge of the name card on Dina's chair. He picked it up. "I folded it once, then let it drift into the trash bin nearby." He turned around and walked back to Carol, who had never asked for vengeance, only truth. And now, finally, she had it. Ross thought the ceremony would be the end of it, the final stamp, the closing door, the point of no return. But closure doesn't arrive at the altar. Sometimes, it arrives uninvited. The day after the wedding, Ross and Carol were scheduled to fly out for a short honeymoon, nothing extravagant, just a private cabin by a lake. Carol was packing when Sandra, Ross's assistant, burst into the office, phone in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. She showed up. Ross looked up. "Who?" "Dina. At your press event, she's outside, with a microphone, and a videographer." Carol came to the door just as Sandra finished. "She's filming?" "She's calling it a moment of accountability. She says she's here to apologize." Ross stood very still. He had felt so sure that walking away, saying nothing, was the final act of strength. Sure that he owed her no performance. Sure that silence was the cleanest ending. But now, she was writing a new ending, loudly, publicly, with shaky hands and calculated vulnerability. Carol looked at him. "You don't have to go out there." "I know." But he did. Ross walked out slowly. Cameras were already pointed. Dina stood just outside the event canopy in a muted trench coat, holding a small mic and talking as if hosting a confessional. "And if he sees this, I just want him to know, I wasn't trying to destroy him, I was just trying to be heard." Ross didn't interrupt. He waited until her crew noticed him. The moment their eyes met, everything fell quiet. She turned. "Ross?" He nodded once. "Let's talk." "Off camera?" "No." She hesitated. "You wanted public closure," he said. "Let's do it right." A makeshift silence circled them. Phones were up, microphones leaned forward. Dina stood still, like someone who had lost control of a script halfway through. "I didn't expect you to come out," she said. "I didn't expect you to keep writing chapters." Her eyes watered. "I never wanted to be your villain." "You didn't ghost me because you were afraid," he replied. "You did it because it was easier than telling the truth." "That's not fair." "No, it's accurate. You blocked me, deleted me, and then you turned the absence into art." She looked down. "You're not sorry I was hurt," Ross continued. "You're sorry I stopped playing the quiet role in your story." She flinched. The crowd leaned in. "I loved you," Ross said. "Even when it wasn't smart, even when it wasn't healthy. I stood by you because I thought loyalty would earn me clarity, but all it earned me was erasure." She started crying. "I didn't know how to fix us," she whispered. "You didn't try, you replaced me, and now that I moved on, you're trying to fracture that too. That's not true. You knew what that video would do. You knew people would doubt me, doubt Carol, doubt the timeline. I just wanted to be heard. You were heard. The night you blocked me, the night you left without goodbye, that was loud enough." Her shoulders shook. "But you—" Dina's voice cracked. "You didn't chase me." Ross's expression stayed still. "I wasn't supposed to," he said. "That's not how love works." She covered her face. "I waited for you," she sobbed. "Even after everything, I waited for you to come back. I left Miller, I turned down deals, I thought maybe—" Ross shook his head. "Then why sabotage my future?" "I didn't sabotage it, I just couldn't watch it unfold without me," and there it was, the most honest thing she'd said in 2 years. Ross inhaled deeply. "I would have forgiven you," he said, "if you'd come with the truth, not performance, not spin, not strategy, just the truth. I didn't think the truth would be enough. It would have been." She looked up at him. "And now?" Ross turned slightly, gesturing toward the people watching. "There's no now. This was your curtain call, and you used it to confess envy, not love." Dina's lips parted, but no sound came. Ross looked straight into the lens of the nearest phone. "For anyone listening," he said calmly, "I am not ashamed of loving her, but I am proud of surviving her." Then he turned and walked away, no mic drop, no dramatic flourish, just finality. Inside, Carol was waiting. He walked straight to her. "She tried," he said. "I saw. She wanted a reaction, she got a truth." Carol didn't look smug, just grounded. "Then let's get out of here." He smiled. "Lake House?" She nodded. "Lake House." As they drove away, phones buzzed around the city. Clips, reactions, fan edits, debates, but none of them mattered. Because Ross had finally said everything he needed to, and he said it on his terms. That night, Carol and Ross lit a fire in the cabin. Beanie snored in a blanket near their feet. He didn't scroll, she didn't post. They talked about the garden they wanted to plant, about a business workshop they could host next spring, about whether they wanted to adopt. And somewhere between a laugh and a long pause, Ross said, "I thought the loudest thing I ever heard was silence." Carol waited. But it wasn't. The loudest thing was her apology, because it came too late. Carol touched his hand. "And what did mine sound like?" He looked at her. "You didn't apologize, you just stayed." She leaned in. "That's all I needed to hear." They kissed, no audience, no angles, no storyline. Just the truth. And this time, it was enough. 3 months after the wedding, Ross stood in front of a crowd he never thought he'd face again. Investors, media, and executives from the same industry that once dismissed him as a background character in Dina's narrative. He was no longer just Ross, the caterer. He was Ross Henley, CEO of Henley Conde, a nationally recognized design house for bespoke weddings and experiential events. Carol stood beside him, her nameplate glinting. Creative director. Their rebrand was complete, their reach had tripled, their name was respected. And Dina? She had vanished from the front page. Until that morning. Ross's lawyer, June, walked in and slid a folder across the desk. "She filed this week," she said. Ross opened the folder. It was a bankruptcy petition. Dina had defaulted. United Influence, once a PR behemoth, had collapsed. 4 major brands had pulled out after the fallout from her apology stunt video. Public trust had dried up, her content metrics had tan. Kedin engagement was non-existent. Ross skimmed silently. "She's trying to liquidate everything," June continued. "Even her podcast archive, the one you appeared in." Ross didn't flinch, until that part. Carol looked up. "Can she do that?" "She's attempting to package old relationship episodes as vintage emotional audio essays." Ross leaned back, thoughtful. "She'll call it healing. Sell the past as performance one last time." "Can she legally?" Carol asked. "You never signed a release," June answered. "You can block it." He was quiet. Then, "Let her." Carol blinked. "You sure?" Ross nodded. "Let her keep the echo. Let her choke on memory." But when the meeting ended, Ross sat in his office alone. He typed into his laptop, checked a few registrars, pulled out a card. By sunset, he had done one last thing. He bought her brand's abandoned domain, www.unitedinfluence.co, and redirected it. The page was stark white. At the top, a title, Closure, a masterclass on walking away without begging, presented by Ross, Carol Henley. A single button below it, Get Started. It redirected to their event agency homepage. The page went viral within hours. No hashtags, no press release, just reputation, perfectly weaponized. And Dina? She never addressed it, because this time, she understood, the story was over. Later that month, Ross and Carol launched a mentorship program. They called it the Second Draft. It was built for creatives who had been silenced, overshadowed, or ghosted by industry gatekeepers. Their first class sold out in 40 minutes. One of the guest speakers, a former friend of Dina's who had once chosen neutrality, not anymore. The industry shifted. People Ross once watched shake Dina's hand on red carpets were now reposting quotes from his workshops. Loyalty is not silence. Closure doesn't require confrontation, just peace and proof. Real power is when you let them speak, and you win anyway. 6 months later, Dina reached out. Not through PR, not through Miller. He'd disappeared after deleting all his content. She sent a simple message via email. Subject, no agenda. Body, I hope you're well. I'm finally quiet. Ross didn't reply. He forwarded the email to Carol, then archived it. He didn't need revenge anymore. He'd already achieved it. That winter, Henley Company was nominated for 2 National Design Awards. Carol gave the acceptance speech. Ross stood in the audience, holding her hand from the front row, watching her shine. When the press asked how they built something so successful from a messy past, Carol said, by not looking back, and by learning to turn pain into precision. Ross added, by marrying someone who never once made me feel like a storyline. The applause was real, because the ending was earned. On their first anniversary, Ross and Carol went back to the lake. No cameras, no announcements. They built a fire. He took out the wedding gift he hadn't given her last year. A frame. Inside, a single piece of paper. A printed screenshot of the RSVP list from their wedding. All guests blurred, except one line. Ms. Dina Ray, status, unconfirmed. Carol laughed. He said, it's proof. Of what? That no matter how loud the past knocks, sometimes, it's just not invited in. They burned the printout. I watched it curl to ash, and slept under stars no algorithm could reach. That's the story. No cliffhanger, no return cameo. Just a man who loved wrongly, got ghosted, got up, and then built a new stage, without begging anyone to stay in the audience. Ross didn't need revenge, he just needed the right woman to clap when he walked off stage for the last time.